Hello friends, this is Odds, and if you're new to this channel, we play a lot of Dead by Daylight, mostly live on stream while chatting to our audience. Now, during all of these years, I've seen so many suggestions to change DBD for the better, and I've come to classify them in roughly 4 categories. The first ones are good ideas that will likely happen at some point in the future, such as, for example, having more information in the endgame screen, seeing more stats. That would be awesome, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have this feature in the future. Then, second, we have the ideas that are really good but will probably never happen, such as being able to rejoin a game after accidentally disconnecting or having a replay mode. This would be amazing to have, but the developers have explained that due to some technical limitations, these features will probably never happen. So it would be nice, but you just can't do anything about some of these things. Then we have the ideas that are really terrible, and they're very obviously terrible. Some people suggest that survivors, for example, should play in first-person mode, which would be fun for a little bit, but obviously the whole game would not survive with such a change. And these ideas are really easy to dismiss. I honestly don't feel like you need more than a minute to talk about each of them. But the fourth type of idea is the ones that we're going to discuss in this video. The ideas that seem good at first or seem like they could be really nice for the game, but there's something really problematic about each of them that makes them impossible or even damaging to the game. And sometimes I don't find myself able to talk about each of these ideas and why it wouldn't work for DBD, so I'm making this video to address all of them at once. And the first one, this seems like such a good idea, and as a content creator, I should be completely on board. Just make DBD free to play. Dead by Daylight right now has a very generous monetization. You can unlock many of the characters for free. The base game is only $20, sometimes less, sometimes even free for a weekend. Why not just make it free completely so that anyone can play? And then you can just make money by selling tons of Sable skins to new players. That would be amazing. As a content creator, my audience would probably grow even larger, and I should be completely on board. But there's an unfortunate reality, which is that DBD does not have a solid anti-cheat problem. And this is not really theoretical. If you remember, some years ago, Dead by Daylight was indeed free for a weekend. During that weekend, anyone that claimed the game on the Epic Game Store managed to secure it for life. And this was, I think, one of the biggest catastrophes, one of the biggest blunders that DBD has ever made. In that weekend, cheater groups managed to snag thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of free accounts that now had DBD forever. And these accounts sit somewhere until someone buys cheats, and then they use this account, and when they get banned for cheating, well, they just move on to another account that's also free. It made cheating so prevalent afterwards. Don't get me wrong, even if it hadn't happened, cheaters find other ways to get cheap accounts, but it definitely didn't help. Making DBD free to play would make the cheater problem 1,000 times worse, I am convinced. And sadly, that's all you need to hear about it. If this wasn't a problem, if we had a more solid anti-cheat or better safety mechanisms, I wouldn't mind it. If there was some kind of like phone number that you need to use your phone to validate, that would be okay. But then you open a whole can of worms, because in a lot of countries, it's impossible to do that. So yeah, probably the way it should be, keep DBD as a small price to make cheaters have to pay a lot of money if they want to buy multiple accounts, ideally, and that should be the best compromise, and make everything else in the game cheap or free. That's probably how it should be. Another one that gets asked really commonly is, why not just remove the blood point cap? Nowadays, you can have 5 million blood points in your account, which is really generous. And now we have the spending feature that you can spend all your blood points immediately, so it's great. But for a long time, we had a 2 million blood cap. And for an even longer time before that, we had a 1 million blood point cap. And trust me, I am the person in the world that hates this cap more than anyone else. I hated this. Every time I play DBD on stream, I need to stop and then spend points because I'm at the cap, and I start my stream and I need to spend 15 minutes wasting time spending blood points. It's super annoying. But the developers have explained why they need it, and honestly, I completely agree. The first one, and it's a bit of a no-brainer, is also cheaters. If you have a blood point cap where your blood points, for the most part, cannot go past 1 million, and then you see an account that has 999 million, then it's really easy to tell who is cheating, because cheaters sometimes mess with numbers, and that makes them really easy to detect. So it's really nice that you have some kind of limit that makes it easy to tell whether someone is cheating or not. The other one that I think is maybe maybe even more important, is account farming and account selling. There is a booming economy in DBD, especially in the Eastern territories, where people play DBD. They farm, they load into a game with an auto clicker, they get, I don't know, 1,000 blood points, and they do this 24/7, and then they get iridescent shards, and then they sell the account maybe a few months later for a few bucks, and the account already has some characters unlocked or some stuff unlocked. If blood points could be hoarded forever, it would really become a problem, because a lot of people would literally just farm blood points, maybe obtain them illegally, and then sell accounts that have unlimited blood points, so that it would be really, really attractive, and it would have a really, really bad intersection with cheating as well, because you would buy an account and you wouldn't know if it's legit or not. So it could be really, really troublesome. Another one that I don't think is so important for us, but that is important for the developers, is retention and people playing the game at key times. The developers explain that if the blood cap is too high or is non-existent, what many players will do when a new chapter comes out is they will load into the game, they will unlock the new characters, they will pump a lot of blood points, they will unlock all the perks, and then they stop playing. Whereas if there is a cap, you can't really do that, because you cannot hoard BP. So instead you spend 1 million, which took a while back in the day, then you played a bit more, maybe you spend another 1 million, and then you take a break, but you've already played the game a little bit more, you've engaged with the community, so it makes the player base look more vibrant and more alive. So I kind of understand that, it makes sense. Another one that is going to inevitably happen, the developers have already announced that there will be some kind of reward for hitting Prestige 100. But some people are being a little bit unreasonable about this. Some people expect to have crazy rewards, maybe a unique item or something that even affects gameplay, and this definitely shouldn't happen. The rewards for hitting Prestige 100 should be pretty small. I say this as someone with several P100s. I say this as someone that plays the game a lot, that could easily get a lot of them compared to the average player. Prestige 100 is an insane, absurd grind. For Prestiges 1 to 3, you get some rewards. From Prestiges 4 to 6, you get some rewards. From Prestiges 7 to 9, you get like 3 tiny little charms for each character, right? And then from Prestiges 10 to 99, you get nothing. Nothing. It's such an insane grind. There is absolutely no one in hell that has Prestige 100 every character, because it's such an absurd grind. It's really unrealistic to expect any player to do that for everyone, and it's really unrealistic to even expect casual players to do it multiple times. So the reward for P100 will have to be some small cosmetic, some small badge or something like that, maybe something that you get one time when you hit one P100, and that's it. Otherwise, we generally are putting a really unhealthy pressure on newer players to spend 90 levels for 90 prestiges for nothing. So no reward from Prestige 9 to Prestige 100 is just, I think, in my opinion, a really, really bad system. So yeah, please, no huge or crazy rewards for P100. Another thing that people have suggested, for so long, is to have the ability to craft items out of other items, or to resell add-ons that you don't want. And this one comes from a very natural place. If you play a lot of DBD, you're gonna have hordes, and I mean massive mountains of certain add-ons or certain offerings or certain whatevers that you get in the bloodpoint that are kind of useless. You're never gonna use them. You will literally never ever use them. They're gonna sit there forever. And many players naturally expect the developers to do something about this. What if I could turn this into something else? What if I could sell this to get some BP back? The idea of reselling doesn't seem so bad, and I kind of understand it, but I think this has two major problems. Number one, our disparity. There are some people that started playing a year ago, and there are some people that have been playing this game for 9 years straight. I know some players that have tens and tens of thousands of add-ons on each of their killers. If you make a system that gives these players a way to make money, you are going to create an elite, small elite of players that suddenly have hundreds of thousands of blood points compared to everyone else, which doesn't feel really fair. And the other problem with crafting or reselling add-ons is that you basically encourage players to use the meta even more. So as we know right now, offerings, it used to be map offerings and maybe blood point offerings, and nobody bothered about anything else, right? No luck offerings, no small BP offerings. If you make it so that some things are resold, this game is going to feel even more like a casino where you have to, jank the lever, get what you want. No, okay, sell it, do it again. It would just be a much better idea to rework all of the offerings, rework all of the add-ons, rework all of the things that show up in the blob web, and make each of them at least somewhat usable. Give them at least one scenario where you would want to use each of them. That, I think, is a better idea than to allow you to resell them, which, as I said, would benefit some players very, very much. I would be able to get massive blood points for no reason, just because I've been hoarding items for a very, very long time. In a very similar vein, some people expect the developers to make some items extremely, extremely rare. So, for example, when you talk about items that are really, really powerful, that have a big impact in the game, such as iridescent add-ons on Oni, iridescent add-ons on Killer, or Oni doesn't have very good iridescent ones, or maybe syringes on Survivors, on brand new parts on Survivors, things like that. They are like, okay, these items are fine, they should just be extremely, extremely rare. The way to balance them is to make them very, very, very scarce. And this is not the way to go. In my opinion, you should make all of the items balanced and assuming that you could find them every single match, and not make them just something that should be like an insane one-time use. The problem if you make certain items really, really rare is that it's going to help players that play the game a lot, that already have a lot of reserves of that item. If the item is a new item that nobody has, that could work a little bit better, but still, anyone that has a billion trillion blood points would be able to get a lot of these items, and anyone that plays the game casually would not be able to. So if you're playing Trapper and you play the game very little, and you play against Survivors that have crazy rare items and you don't bring crazy rare items yourself, it would not feel really fair. I think that would accentuate some of the issues that you have in DBD rather than make them better. So I really, really fundamentally disagree with this idea. And there's another option, sad aspect to consider when we talk about this idea, and it's the fact that people use save injectors. Today, this week, this year, you probably have played against hundreds, if not thousands of players with items that are not legitimately obtained. I have seen a lot of people get banned in DBD because they trusted someone, because they bought some cheat, because they bought an account that came with 9,999 of every item. Some people do not want to grind the game. They will pay for shortcuts. They will use cheats. They will buy accounts that have every item, multiplied by an absurd amount. And if these rare items could be used every match because they're cheated in, how would you know? How exactly would you know if you play against, say, 4 Survivors with 4 super mega rare items? How would you know that they are cheating? You wouldn't. You would have no way to know. So yeah, really not a big fan of this idea. We're now getting a little bit more into the gameplay and the lobbies. Let's talk about the idea of making all lobby backgrounds available. This is one that gets asked a lot because every time we have a new chapter or some crazy new event, the appearance of the game changes. We get a different background. Sometimes it's really colorful. Sometimes it's iconic for different reasons. And people get attached to these backgrounds. They like them. Or maybe they even hate them and they want to go back to the default one, right? I think the ability to go back to the default one, that one's not a bad idea. Having the ability to switch between the current theme background and the normal one, in case the light or the color is uncomfortable to your eyes, that's completely fine. But having all of the backgrounds stored in the games for you to switch and pick which one you want, even though it sounds really, really cool, just has the problem of file size. Each of these backgrounds has assets, sounds, things that take up a lot of space, and eventually they get recycled and removed in patches. But if you had to have all of them, it would just make the game much larger in file size. We already have an issue with DBD where sometimes a small update forces you to re-download the entire game and you're sitting there downloading 40 gigabytes of information, and it's already pretty bad as it is. I don't think we should make that worse. So this one, for that very simple reason, probably shouldn't happen. This one, honestly, is not going to get asked anymore, but for a very long time, this is probably one of the questions I've seen the most in my chat. Odds, what if, instead of making map offerings send you to a specific map, we reversed them and we made it so that when you use a map offering for, say, Larry's, it just prevents you from going to Larry's? I'm so sorry to all the people that have asked this question, but this is possibly the stupidest question, the dumbest idea out of this entire list. I don't understand how someone asks this and doesn't immediately, I'm sorry, I sound like really upset, I'm not, but I don't understand how someone asks this question and doesn't realize immediately what is the problem with this. So normally, the reason survivors and killers want to use certain maps is because they want to take advantage of a certain part of that map. Maybe they have balanced landing and they want to go to a map with a tall building so they can fall from it. Or maybe they're playing a stealth killer and they want to go inside a map that is indoors. That makes sense, right? And sometimes people want to avoid certain maps. They've played 3 times in an indoors map. Now they want to play in the opposite, right? But making map offerings reverse makes no sense, because if I'm a survivor and I don't want to go to an indoor map, let's say that I use the Hawkins offering because I don't want to go to Hawkins. Well, I could go to Larry's. It just changes, it literally changes a little bit my chances, but I could still go to an indoor map. And as a killer, it's the same. If I'm playing Ghostface and I don't want to play in an outdoor map and I burn an Eerie of Crows because I don't want to go to Eerie, well, I could still go to Ormond. So this literally would do nothing. It would make map offerings completely useless. The only people that could reasonably use map offerings in this situation is survivor friends. If you have a full stack of survivor friends, then one of them could burn Larry's, one of them could burn Hawkins, one of them could burn Midwich, and now you could kind of avoid almost every indoor map in the game. But other than that, there's literally no reason to use a map offering because you're not guaranteed anything. This would only change if each player could burn 3 or 4 offerings. If you could burn 3 or 4 offerings each time, then you could use a BP offering, then you can use an anti-Larry's offering. So then it could make sense, but that's not how DBD works. So yeah, this is one of the... I don't understand why so many people ask this question. I found it so silly. Nowadays, map offerings have changed. They no longer guarantee that you go to a certain map. Now they just increase the chances by a set amount, and that's it. So I don't think we're going to see this question anymore. They're definitely not as problematic and as dominant as before. Another question that I get every now and then, I think it's pretty unreasonable, but some people still don't see the issue with it. Just show who is in a survivor fence in the lobby. Basically, when you play as a killer, you see the survivors that you're going against, and some people would like to know which of these survivors are in a group. This would give you a massive advantage. Being able to tell who is playing by themselves would allow you to make a lot of decisions and capitalize on their weaknesses. But if you really think about it, there's so much wrong with this idea. First of all, the simple first downside of this, people would just dodge lobbies. They would queue in, see that there's 4 solo survivors. Awesome, let's play. See that there's a 3-man or a 4-man group. They might be smarter, and they would just leave. This would literally make so many killers afraid, sometimes for no reason. Sometimes 4-man survivors don't really play that much better, but they would definitely get dodged all the time, which would be obviously terrible for queue times. But the more problematic aspect is that there are some strategies in DBD that really hurt solo players. Blindness is a status effect that really hurts solo players. If you slug someone on the ground and you make everyone else blind, they can't see it, it can be really devastating. But the risk of this strategy is that if you do it against a 4-man, it doesn't really work. So yeah, it would basically just allow certain killers to exploit some kind of unfun strategies on solo players, and then if they see that it's a 4-man, they just dodge. And I think when you play DBD, you need to prepare for the best and for the worst. You don't know if the survivors are going to be coordinated, maybe less coordinated, if you're going to get a great map or not so good map. I think the fact that things are uncertain is what makes this game ultimately a little bit more fair. The opposite is also true. Some people expect the survivors to have information on the killer and who the killer is. So if you're queuing as a survivor, you would see that, for example, you're going against a trapper. Oh man, honestly, there is one good argument to be made for this particular idea, and I cannot relate to it, which is accessibility. Some people cannot play against the plague, for example, because the puking sounds make them really uncomfortable. Some people do not want to play against a doctor because the staticky images kind of trigger their photosensitivity. For these people, honestly, this feature would be amazing, and God bless them, right? But this would be otherwise an absolutely terrible idea. These accessibility issues that I mentioned, they should just be fixed on their own. Give you an option to turn off the puke sounds from Plague and replace them with something neutral and something like that. That would be much, much better. The problem with this is that a lot of killers that are strong would get dodged immediately. Even if you're not a great nurse player or a great Kaneki player or a great Blight player, if you see an S tier killer or anything close to that, you're just gonna dodge it as a survivor. Not very fun, not great for queue times. And the worst part is that some killers have counterplay with specific items. So if you're playing Nemesis, congrats. Now everyone's going to switch to a flashlight. And it's not like you can change killer at last minute because you can't change killer in the queue. And if you're playing, I don't know, Trapper, you could use a map to see the traps on the ground. Obviously, that's going away soon in the next update. But my point is, a lot of killers need the element of surprise. Killers that are on the stealthy side, like, for example, Ghostface, killers that are on the preparation side, such as Hag, they really, really need the element of surprise. And it is honestly terrible if the people that you play against already know from the very, very first moment what you're bringing. If you've ever played in a tournament, tournaments typically work like that. The killer is already announced at the start, so the opponents know what you're doing. And playing Hag in a tournament is completely different just because of that. Obviously, the quality of the survivors too, but mostly because of that first idea that they already have, which is to, okay, we're gonna find the Hag and we're gonna disrupt her, and there's no element of surprise. In my opinion, really, really bad idea. This one breaks my heart. This one breaks my heart because honestly, it could be really good for the game to separate the serious players and the not so serious, more casual players. But the truth is, you cannot just add a rank mode in DBD. Some people ask, oh, what if we just add a rank mode? That would be perfect. It really wouldn't be. If you split the queue in two, and one of them says ranked, very serious, and the other one says casual, very casual, that in itself wouldn't do anything. A lot of people that would play really, really hard would still play on casual. And now the complaint would be, oh my god, I'm playing casual. Why is my killer tryharding so much? And there's also the whole fact that if you split the queues, the queue times are going to start to get worse. And maybe in ranked, the killers would take 10 minutes to find someone. What are the rewards that you're going to give them? If you don't give them rewards, why would anyone play ranked? The developers definitely seem very interested in not showing us very much anything related to skill or how much exactly, how well exactly you're doing compared to other killers. So this seems like something they possibly wouldn't do. But even if they did, there's a follow-up question. What are the rule differences between ranked and casual? It stands to reason that, like in tournaments, in ranked, many things would be banned. So, for example, maybe in ranked, survivors would not be able to repeat perks, which happens in DBD tournaments all the time, and maybe killers wouldn't have access to, like, the strongest add-ons, which also happens in tournaments, to balance things up a little bit. But then you have a problem, because if you ban the strongest things in ranked, then there are genuine matches in casual that could be harder than in ranked. So, if you play in ranked and your opponents are kind of restrained with what they can bring, that's amazing. But then if you switch to casual, which should be easier, now you might go against 4 brand new parts, 4 sprimpers, 4 unbreakables, 4 decisives. So it creates this really weird paradox where somehow the casual queue would have more hardcore stuff than the rank one. So I really don't know how to broach this topic. I don't know how to address this. And I'm afraid the developers are not even going to try. Okay. This is not the one that I've been asked the most, but it's the one that drives me the most insane. There are some people out there that are convinced that this game's problems would all be solved overnight, completely, if they just added a voice chat. Let's completely assume, for the sake of argument, that adding a voice chat option would be easy. It probably wouldn't be technically super easy. There's so many platforms and stuff like that. But let's just assume that the developers just press a button and the next day we have voice chat. The killer obviously can't chat to the survivors. That would be pretty insane. I don't want to be chased by a Bubba hurling slurs at me, but that's an argument for another day. But let's say that the survivors get to chat with each other. Let's assume that it only happens once you're in game, because if you're pre-game, like that would be really weird. If someone could join your lobby, say something horrible, and then leave before you can even report them, the reporting system would have to be changed. Well, let's just address some simple facts. For American players and people in Australia, hey, maybe it could work. Most of the people that you're going to play with speak English, so it could solve a lot of the frustrations of playing solo queue, where you're like, oh my god, the killer has this perk, guys, watch out. And there generally could be so much good that comes from being able to communicate with complete strangers. I do believe that this could be replaced by some kind of ping or communication wheel system, because the big issue with voice chat is that a lot of countries, like in Europe, you're not necessarily going to be paired with people from your same country. You're going to be playing with people from France, from Eastern Europe, from Scotland, which, even if you speak English, it's going to be a little bit hard to understand them. That was a hopefully harmless joke. And that's not necessarily going to help you with communication. The biggest issue, however, is moderation and harassment. DBD already has a pretty dark history of people getting harassed and cheaters getting away with a lot of harassment, and even bad faith actors ruining charity streams and things like that by being very disruptive. If they had the option to also come in and start saying racist slurs in the chat, that would be terrible. Obviously, you could just say, well, just mute them, just disable the whole thing, right? What is the point of having something if you have to disable it just to be safe? But the biggest problem, in my opinion, is moderation. How exactly would DBD moderate this? Because I could play with you in a lobby, right? And I could record it and I could edit it in an editing program and make it look like you said something terrible to me. So how exactly would the developers know if this evidence is real? They wouldn't be able to know. They would need logs. They would need for every conversation to be recorded or transcribed. And here's the problem. If everything has to be transcribed, well, you need a certain technology for that, and you need to account for every single language in the world. Right now, the developers, if you type something really, really nasty, they have a log that they can copy paste. Even if they don't speak the language, they could copy paste it through some translation and maybe understand if you're harassing someone and ban you if they need to. How exactly would you do that with possibly every language in the world when you don't speak it, even if you have some software to transcribe it? It is honestly the kind of thing that the developers of this particular game don't seem like they can take on. Right now, the reporting system is so bad, it's so slow, there's so little transparency, in my opinion. When you get a report that says, oh, there's been an action of your ban, that doesn't mean the person that you reported got banned. You don't really know what happened. You really generally know nothing. Adding more stress to the report system just seems like a terrible idea, in my opinion. That would just enable bad faith actors and would make things worse. So yeah, until we have a better report system, the voice chat idea, I don't even want to hear about it. It just seems like it would generally add nothing. Keep in mind, most people playing in a group already are on Discord. They don't need it. Most people playing solo, I would say most people don't care. So it's very possible that even if we had this system, you would put it on and the new frustration would be, yo, I'm on voice chat. Why is no one answering, guys? Why is no one answering? It would literally just shift the frustration from one thing to another. It might not change much, even if it was added. So yeah, my least favorite idea of the whole list, this one. Just add basekit corrupt intervention. Some other people also changed this question to just add secondary objectives. They're both very, very similar, right? So the idea for some people is that survivors have a really easy time doing gens. Doing gens is really simple or really boring, and they get to gens really quickly and the gens go by too fast. It would be more fun if there were secondary objectives. If you had to pick up a can of gasoline, or if you had to find parts that you need to put on the generator, or if the generator was a block at the start for X amount of time, like a basekit corrupt intervention. At high level, all of these things could theoretically work. I expect the maps would need to be changed a lot. I expect some killers would need to be tweaked a lot. But I think at high level, it could work quite well. But keep in mind, the developers have tested things like this. They have tested alternative generator types recently. They did tell us that they tried a long time ago a version of it's like an opposite endgame collapse. It would be like a starting game slowdown. And they didn't like it. And I'm going to be very honest, it's mostly because of new players. New players have an insane amount of information in this game, and they don't process it very well. We know from the developers that new players sometimes don't know how to equip perks, and they don't know that they're supposed to play with perks because it's not explained well. They even changed it so that characters automatically come equipped with perks just in case. So that tells you already a lot. New players are so overwhelmed that the fact that generators are easy is a blessing for them. It's really, really, really good for them. And if you make generators a little bit more complicated, especially in indoor maps, which are really, really badly designed, you would absolutely kill this game. It would be so impossible for new players to know what they're doing. I would highly, highly, highly recommend to play other asymmetrical games that have this feature and then see for yourself. I played a game called Home Sweet Home a long time ago where there were no generators. Instead, you had to do a 3-step operation. You had to find some incense, put it in some place, pray to it for a little while, then do something else, and then you could kill the killer. That was such an impossibly, like, my first few games felt so impossible because I didn't know the maps, I didn't know where to go. It was really, really frustrating. Anything that complicates this for new players is going to result in them being very, very frustrated, and the kill rates are going to spike up. And then when the kill rates at low level spike up, the developers are going to make changes that affect all of the players, including you or me, that are a bit more experienced. So even though there is a good sentiment behind this, people want to add a layer of complexity. I think this is the wrong place to add that complexity because you're really just hurting new players. That's my impression. I don't feel super strongly about this one, but I think that's why they won't do it. This one has to be the second most asked question out of all of them. Odds, what would you think if each survivor had their own little buff, their own little unique thing? The two most popular ideas is that if you play Bill, you are forced to run one of their perks. And if you play Dwight, then you have to run one of his perks or all of his perks. And the other idea is that each survivor would have a tiny little passive ability, such as, for example, Dwight is 2% faster in gens, Meg is 1% faster running, Jake is 50% quieter in general, Ace gets better items in general, things like that. There's one problem with this idea, and it's that it would absolutely kill the existing variety of survivors. The existing variety of survivors is a wonderful thing in DBD. You could play against 4 LODs, you could play against one of each kind, you can have survivors that look completely different each lobby from the previous ones, and that is great. If people really like Claudette, they can Prestige 100 her and play as well as anyone else playing another character. If you make passive abilities, first of all, that is a slap to the face to anyone that specializes in one character. Because now if you played, I don't know, Jonah and his passive is terrible, then why would you ever play Jonah? And the immediate effect that this would have is that your lobbies would start to look all the same. People would very quickly figure out which character has the best passives, and then that passive would become the #1 thing to run. And if it's Meg that has the best passive, you're only going to see Megs. And the worst part is that if survivors that come from a paid licensed DLC have a good passive or the best passive, now we have a very good argument that this game leans into the pay-to-win model. So, for example, if the new survivor from The Walking Dead that's going to come out has a passive that's like stun the killer for half a second more, let's exaggerate, then everyone would want that. And then suddenly you're being left out if you can't afford it. I really like the fact that survivors all play the same. I really like the fact that you can go from one to another and there's not any big changes, and I think that should stay. That's one of the most wonderful things about DBD, and it's also something that simplifies the game for new players, which I think at this point we really need to prioritize. Because keep in mind that everything else in the game, perks, maps, mechanics, super rare scenarios, incredibly complex interactions between perks and items and stuff like that, it's starting to get so convoluted and so bloated for new players. Everything else should really be simple for them. Another one that gets asked pretty commonly, why not just allow the killer to choose where to put their hexes and make them able to relit them or replace them, or even show the killer which hex is which? Honestly, I do believe the hexes are a risky feature, a risk versus reward type of gameplay, and they should stay that way. If, as a killer, I can have 3 trap hexes and one that's the real one, and the survivors don't know which one, and I'm playing Singularity, it's just gonna be awful. Like, they're gonna have to do totems that I'm gonna defend horribly with Throw the Hunt, which is gonna slow them down. I'm gonna interrupt them, and totems can be easily interrupted. The only thing I'm gonna be able, like, the only thing that they can hope is that they get lucky. If they don't get lucky, I'm gonna defend the one totem really, really nastily, and that kind of information would generally not make hexes really, really fun. I do think that not knowing which hex you have is part of the identity of hexes, and it's fun on both sides, in my opinion. I don't think you should have that information. Being able to choose where you put your hex, I don't think is a terrible idea for a new hex. If there's a new hex with a specific effect that is tailored towards you placing it somewhere, that's not a bad thought. Being able to move all hexes, though, is a little scary. Keep in mind, there are a lot of places that over the months get bugged. So, for example, you could go to Larry's, right? And maybe there's one totem where it spawned wrong, and now the survivors can't cleanse it because there's an object in front of it. Even the killer could choose which to place. Anytime there's an issue like this, it would be much, much easier to exploit it, which I don't love. And if there's one, for example, one hex on top of a hill, and you're playing against the hunters, what exactly are you gonna do? Like, what are you gonna do? If she can choose to put that hex there, what are you gonna do? Just not cleanse it? Like, keep in mind, survivors, if you have to dodge a hatchet even for 1 second, your entire progress on that totem gets reset. And with Throw the Hunt, totems can take 30 seconds or maybe a bit less, but they can take quite a long time on average to cleanse. So yeah, this seems like a feature that really wouldn't add anything to the game, that would otherwise just create maybe rare but possible scenarios where you would be in a really, really unfun spot where you just can't do certain totems and they're really easy to defend. And I don't know, that doesn't seem super fun to me. If you want to rework totems or make them invisible at the start of the game so that survivors don't spawn looking at a lit totem for 10 seconds, maybe, yeah, other small changes to Hex Totems, I'm all for. I don't mind. But this one in particular, I've never been a huge fan of. This one's also another one that I really don't love. The idea that you should kill switch or disable certain perks to encourage diversity. I think the perk and build diversity should be a natural consequence of all the perks being viable, or all the perks being fun, or all the perks at least being situationally good. The developers have done a decent job in the last year or 2 years in making a lot of the bad perks a lot more usable, but especially a few years ago, there were so many perks on both sides that were horrendous, like awful, terrible. Like, it doesn't do anything in most games, and even when it does, it's not much. So I don't like the idea of banning certain perks or removing certain perks to put a gun to the player's head and be like, oh, run something else. That's just not how things should work. It would create resentment. Oh, I just bought Freddy and his perk is disabled. What the hell? It would not really go well with anything. We already had a bit of a problem here. Where in the old tomes, sometimes a new tome would come out, and the first thing that would be in the tome would be a challenge that says, use this perk to, equip this perk and escape 1 time. And you would have, for like a week straight, a lot of games that play the same. Like, everyone's using that perk, and it's not really fun. And it modifies the statistics. The developers don't really know which perks are popular, so they can't really know which ones to maybe touch or change or buff or rework if the stats are warped and they are unrealistic. So no, I don't believe personally in enforcing diversity. I think that diversity in the gameplay should come naturally. That's a very personal one. I can totally appreciate someone disagreeing with this. This one makes me a little bit sad. When people ask me this, I know it comes from a honest place of frustration. What you're gonna find when you play Killer is that some of your games go south, and some survivors are not particularly good winners. They're not good sports. They sit at the exit gates 1 meter away from the exit, right? And they teabag you and they clicky, ha ha ha, and then you come and then they leave. Or maybe they even waste as much of your time as possible and then they say GG easy in the post-game chat. It's so frustrating. And some people think that if you made the end game, the exit gate really scary, survivors wouldn't do this. If you made survivors insta-downable or insta-grabbable in the exit gate, that survivors would somehow respect the killer and all be really nice people and be all gentlemanly. I'm just gonna tell you, this doesn't happen. For those of you that played DBD for many years, you might remember a time when survivors could immediately teleport at the end of a pallet. So when you were on a pallet that was standing, if you press space, you automatically teleported to the other side. So what survivors did is they reached the pallet and they teabagged you because they were safe there, right? They teabagged you, and then when you came close, they press space and whoop, they teleported and vacuumed to the other side. Now they can't do that. So instead, what they do is they go to the pallet, they drop it, and then they teabag you. Survivors will adapt. If they cannot teabag you at the exit line, they will teabag you 1 meter before it. And it's going to be the same thing over and over again. It is impossible to try to control BM. This question also includes people asking, Odds, what if you disable crouching when survivors teabag? If they cannot teabag, they will just say yes with their head. And if they can't say yes with their head, they will click their flashlight. Survivors used to be able to click their flashlights a lot, and they changed that. It's impossible to do it quickly now. It was very annoying. It was a really annoying sound. But now they do other things. So they will always find one way to make fun of you or to try to be annoying. And there's, honestly, you can try to mitigate it, but you're never going to change that. So probably you shouldn't try. This one also gets brought up quite frequently. What if survivors could break breakable walls? Or what if they could build breakable walls? I don't think this should be a perk. If they make a new map with a breakable wall and there's like some kind of like switch next to it that if you hold it for a while, you can break it and then it creates a stronger loop for the survivor. Or the other way around, right? There's like a loop that's really unsafe, but if you stay in one place and you hold the lever for, I don't know, 10 seconds, then it brings up a little barrier, and then it makes the loop stronger for Survivor. If it's in a specific map, I think that could be amazing. It could be great. We already have an example of this in the Nostromo alien map. There are some places where survivors can hold down a lever and create a bit of a trap for the killer. That's fine. But they should not do this for every map. Every map in the game is not balanced around survivors controlling the breakable walls. Some breakable walls, if you break them, they actually make things way worse, and you should never break them. And if you break them in other places, they actually make things much better. It's up to the killer to decide. If you give the survivors the ability to control, whether it's creating or removing breakable walls, you generally have to go back through every map with a breakable wall and analyze whether or not it becomes problematic. So in my opinion, probably don't do this unless you really want to go through every map and reassess everything, which I don't think the developers are going to do. This is an idea to create pallets. And funnily enough, by the time I made this video, we now have in the PTV a perk that allows a survivor to create a pallet. Now, granted, it does take quite a long time to prepare this perk, and it's not something you can spam at the start of the game or anything. And the pallet that you create is called a fragile pallet, which is a pallet that drops, and if it doesn't stop the killer, it just breaks and doesn't really do anything. So I don't think that perk in the Walking Dead chapter is problematic. But what if survivors could create a new pallet, a real pallet? I think this idea is it's a little sad to shoot it down, because I mean the idea of creating resources, it seems fun. What if you could create a wall as well, right, which we addressed earlier? Walls, I've already explained why it's not a good idea, but pallets, we need to talk a little bit more. The thing about pallets, right, is that there's no consistency in DBD. Some maps in DBD have a lot of them, and I mean a lot of them. And they are still not terrible because the map is indoor. Survivors take long to find gens, so it makes sense. For example, Midwich has a lot of indoor maps, a lot of indoor pallets, and it's not that big of a deal. Midwich is a pretty good map for killer. Then there are other maps, like for example, Thompson House, that have very few pallets. And I mean very, very, very few pallets, like 8 or 9 pallets. But it makes up for it by being an open map where survivors can find gens really quickly. So even though it's not ideal for survivors, it's also not too terrible. So if you can create a pallet, it really, like one pallet, it's kind of like having a bill. Sometimes $10 is a lot of money in one country, and sometimes it's not a lot of money in another country. So how do you make it be balanced? I think it's impossible. If survivors could create new pallets and they were real pallets, you would run the problem that in some maps, survivors can run you on a really strong pallet for a long time, make you waste a shit ton of time on that pallet, and then when you break it, they just make it again. I don't think it's something that can be balanced. If the developers ever make a conscious decision to make the amount of pallets equal in every map, that could work. Some maps also have a lot of pallets because they're unsafe. So for example, Greenville Square, the map from Sable with the cinema, it has a lot of double pallets next to each other. There's a lot of them, but they're not very strong. So creating a pallet there really doesn't help you too much. So yeah. The philosophy of pallet safety is so different on each map that I don't think you can create a perk that creates normal pallets without being too weak or being too strong. If it's too fast, in some maps it will be OP. If it's too slow, in some maps it will be completely useless. So yeah. Another perk that I've heard suggested surprisingly often, what if we had a perk that allowed survivors to fast bolt from any angle? So if you don't know, when you approach a window, pallets work differently. But if you approach a window and you have a bit of a running head start and you approach from the perfect angle, which is like a 90-degree cone in front of it, you can fast bolt it, right? And that makes your animation a lot faster. If the killer's hitting you, they're probably going to struggle or maybe not get the hit at all. But that doesn't work if you're already touching the window or if you come from a completely incompatible angle. What if there was a perk to make you fastball everywhere? I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think this is a good idea at all. Let's just be brutally honest. The strongest killers in the game, they don't care about this. Nurse, if you fastbolt, she catches you anyway. Blight, what does it matter? He's gonna hit you anyway. Some of the strongest killers in the game, they are so fast and they ignore windows or they ignore loops to a degree where fast bolting a window one time is not really going to help you very much, even if you had a long cooldown. The real problem comes with some buildings not being designed around fast bolt. Some buildings have a window with a little stopper, with a little obstacle in front of it, because if you had the ability to fastball that window would suddenly be really, really impossible for the killer to outplay it in a reasonable amount of time. So basically, if you make this kind of perk, you're hurting the lower tier killers, which are the ones that really have to catch up to you. And you're also potentially breaking a lot of windows that have existed in the game for a long time that now need to be studied again, and whether or not they get completely broken. Maybe you can vault the window 3 times, the killer can do nothing about it. There are also some windows that you can fastball, but only if you're really, really good at it. And I think it introduces a nice element of skill. Sometimes when I'm chasing a survivor, they get a fastball from an angle that's like super crazy, and I go, wow, this guy really knows what he's doing. With this perk, you just eliminate that sort of skill, and I think it would make the game less interesting and less fair, not more. This one, honestly, I think used to be popular some time ago when the nurse was very, not just considered the strongest killer in the game, which it still is, but she was also really popular, and you would see nurses very, very commonly. A lot of killers felt frustrated that their own characters were not as strong as nurse, so they asked, instead of nerfing the nurse, what if we make every character as strong as nurse, and then we balance around that? So make the survivor stronger, but make it so that every killer really has insane chase potential. And I don't think these people realize that it is literally impossible to make every character like nurse. Unless you want to literally make every character teleport through walls, teleport through pallets, ignore windows completely, which would honestly make all of the perks and all of the elements in DBD completely redundant and completely stupid. You cannot. The nurse has a power that ignores so much of the gameplay. Sure, she has to deal with lines of sight and tall walls, and that's her own little minigame, right? But she ignores so much of the game. If you make every killer teleport and blink through objects, you might as well throw away half the perks in the game that have to do with breaking pallets faster, or resisting stuns, or blocking windows, or stuff like that, because they would be completely worthless. But what if you buff them in other ways? I don't think there is a way you can buff other killers to be as strong as nurse. Like, what are you gonna do? Give Blight infinite rushes? Okay, let's not talk about Blight. Blight is already pretty strong, to be fair. How would Trapper realistically be as good as nurse against competent survivors? We know that nurse players can go on 300 or 400 or 500 win streaks with little or no perks. How exactly would you make Trapper strong enough to be able to go on a massive win streak with no perks? The reality is, unless you want to give him a machine gun, it's impossible. So this idea, I think, misunderstands just how unbelievably unique the nurse is. I don't think the average killer should be S tier strength in their balancing philosophy. Now, a much better idea is, what if we balance every killer around Wesker, around, I don't know, Oni, around Pinhead, around Huntress? Killers that are typically A or B tier in strength. These killers are great. These killers are a great place to aim for. So people that have that sort of philosophy, that killers should all be pretty strong, and maybe a little bit weaker if they're simpler, like Legion, and maybe a little bit stronger if they're very complex and very difficult to play, like maybe Singularity. That I can totally get behind, and I think that's how killers should be balanced. Balance idea. I love this one. Actually, I really love this one. Survivors cannot repeat perks. In tournaments, they have this very simple but very effective rule that makes a lot of things really interesting, where survivors cannot repeat perks. So if there's one really strong perk, only one survivor can run it. And that introduces a lot of risk, because if you have one survivor with an anti-slugging perk, but they don't get slugged, they waste it. And if you have one perk that helps with tunneling, but then the killer tunnels someone else, that introduces a lot of variability, and it's kind of fun. I really like it. It also balances a lot of perks that would otherwise be really strong if you had 4 of them. So I like this in tournaments, but sadly, I don't think it's going to happen in normal gameplay. Unless there is some kind of rank mode or some special queue, I don't think it will happen. You would not be honestly too wrong to suggest that at high level, survivors have the ability to coordinate, and it shouldn't be too unfair that if I play with my friends, there is, maybe solo players are not affected, but if I play with my friends, then I have a restriction where we can both run Swimbers, for example. But the thing is, the average player that plays this game doesn't work like that. The average player that plays this game, they play with friends, they all have the same character because it just came out, right? Maybe they all want to do a depth, so they have the 3 Nicolas Cage perks on Nicolas Cage. It really wouldn't be fair to expect them to run unique perks. And honestly, even if they did, it wouldn't do anything for them because they're relatively new. It's not like they're using these perks to their full potential anyway. So even though this is a cute rule that could be fun in like a rank mode or a special game mode or something like that, I don't think it's gonna happen. And there's nothing you can do to Killer to enforce that variety, because Killer obviously doesn't have anything unique. So if you did this for survivors, what would you do to Killer to compensate? Would you do anything? It's an interesting idea. Probably one of the ones that, if I had to pick one to do, probably would be this one out of this list. Another balance idea, make all killers 115. So as you might know, most killers move at 115, which is 4.6 meters per second, which allows them to catch up the survivors in the normal time you would expect. But some killers have a base kit movement speed that is slower than this. We have Hunters, we have Hag, we have Spirit, we have Deathslinger. We used to have Trickster, but now he's 115. Why not make all the characters faster? The developers have explained that the reason why they don't make every killer a little bit faster is because they found that if they do make them faster, people ignore their power. So Deathslinger people will just chase and only shoot at the last time. And it does make certain characters maybe switch from a nice balance of back and forth risk to like, oh, there's nothing I can do. Either I dodge the shot and then I get run down by a killer that's fast, or I don't dodge it and I get hit anyway because the killer is fast. I think having 110 on some killers makes perfect sense. These killers could have other things change in their base kit to compensate, to make them a little bit more accessible for beginners, but I personally don't hate it. On the flip side, there are some people that suggest that killers like Blight should be 110. And I'm not too convinced that that would fix all of the problems, but if I had to choose between making all killers 115 and making some killers 110, I think I would go for the last one. But yeah, this one's a bit of a contentious issue. I personally agree with the developers' philosophy. I do think some killers, if you're not using the power, you shouldn't be playing them. If you're not using the nurse, obviously the nurse is a bit special. She's even slower than 110. She moves slower than survivors. Like, if you're not using the nurse's power, why even bother playing her, right? If you just want to play Hag like any other killer, why even bother? So I am part of the people that believe that some killers should remain 110. And ideally, there shouldn't be any loops that are so unbelievably strong that 110 killer can never catch you, right? And another problem with 110 killers that even on strong killers like Spirit feels a little rough is haste perks. Whenever you play 110 killer, haste perks absolutely dominate in chase. If you have to play Hag in a place with no traps and you're chasing a survivor that is almost as fast as you while they have a smaller hitbox, yeah, haste perks, in my opinion, are a problem. Not as bad now as some time ago, but hey, that's a different discussion. And I don't think you should overbuff or compensate killers for a part of survivor that should be addressed on its own. And this one also comes from a honest place of nostalgia. Some people believe that every killer should be stealthy. Some people believe that feeling that you have when you play DBD for the first time and you play against your first Myers, that every match should be like this. That every killer should have the element of surprise. I don't love this idea. This is, I'm sorry. I think it would require so much changes, and what you would get at the end of it would not be that good. If every killer becomes a stealth killer, then the idea is always to communicate. The idea is always to run sprint burst visual on everyone. The idea is always to heal with a medkit in a high visibility place at the safest pallet that you can. And it just changes the gameplay into, like, I don't know if you've ever played against stealth killers as a solo survivor. It's one of my least favorite things to do. If I don't bring a medkit and I'm injured, I'm basically at the mercy of my team. If they are doing well and on gens, I can play a bit safe and we'll be okay. If they heal me, that's amazing. If I don't get healed and they're not on gens, like, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to be on gens? It feels really, really bad to basically play solo when each killer theoretically would be testing your communication. So I personally don't love this. If every killer was like this, survivors would adapt and then it wouldn't be a big deal balance-wise, but trust me, it's not fun. If you make every stealth killer happen, basically every survivor is going to be ready. What makes stealth killers so good is that survivors are not ready for them. Sometimes you play Ghostface, you run into two people, you mark them and down them both because they were expecting a trapper, because they were expecting another Kaneki, and that's how it works. If they knew that every killer is stealthy, trust me, you would never get the same results that you're getting now. So this is one of those monkey paws that if you asked for this and you got it, it probably wouldn't turn out the way you want to. Now, this is the most comprehensive list I could come up with. I'm sure there are other questions that I've turned down or that I've disliked or other suggestions that I don't think would be good for the game that I forgot. If you have one idea that you see in the community all the time, brought up and suggested all the time, and that you think would be terrible for the game, leave a comment down below and maybe I'll reply or tell you if I agree or disagree with it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be linking this video to a lot of people that asked me questions. And yeah, hope it was a good time. Thank you so much. See you in the next one. Bye.